Hello everybody, in this video we are going to continue expanding expressions from 3 terms to 4 terms so we can factor quadratic expressions using factoring by grouping. So in some of the previous videos I did a quick reminder of how to find the GCF, which is the greatest common factor. I also remind you how to factor by grouping. And then in the previous video we talked about some of the things we have to do in order for us to go from 3 terms to 4 terms. So we're going to look at these 2 examples right here and use the same steps, the same method to be able to go from 3 to 4. Okay, so that's all we're doing in these videos is just expanding. Once we expand it to 4 terms, we're able to factor by grouping just like we did in some of the previous videos, notes, and examples. So let's jump right into it. So I do want to remind you what it says here on the top. Take your A value, multiply it by your C value, and list all the factors of that number. So I'm going to remind you that the first term is A, the second term is B, the last term is C. Now remember, your A has to be the number with like B squared. Your B has to be the number with just the B raised to the 1 power, and your C has to be your constant. Okay, so there's no way around those are automatic. So they tell us to multiply A and C. So I'm going to put that up here, A times C. And so our A is 2, our C is 21. So we're going to say 2 times 21. So if you multiply those 2 numbers, we're going to get 42. So 42 is the number we're going to use to list all the factors. So 42 is not that big of a number, so hopefully it shouldn't take us very long. So I'm going to use a space over here. I'm going to say 42. And I always like to start with 1, and I like to go in order. So I know that 2 does divide into 42 21 times. So we're going to say 2 times 21. All right, and I'm just dividing. So if you have your calculator, you can just take your 42 and divide it by 3. And it does give us a whole number, which is 14. All right, I'm going to take 42 divided by 4. And it doesn't give me a whole number, so I'm going to skip that one. I know 42 is not divisible by 5, so we're going to skip that one. 42 divided by 6 gives us 7. So after 6 comes 7, but 7's already on the list, so we can actually stop. So these are the only numbers that if you multiply them together would give you 42. So I'm going to ask you to circle the plus sign, because that plus sign tells us whether we're looking for numbers that add or subtract. Because it's a plus sign, I'm looking for 2 of those numbers in that list that we created that will add up to be 17. Now, I know this is a negative 17, but right now I'm not worried about the negative. I'll deal with the negative later. Right now I'm just going to focus on the numbers that add up to be 17. So go back to your list. 1 plus 42 does not give us 17. 2 plus 21 does not give us 17. But 3 and 14 do. So I'm going to ask you to do 3b, 14b. Now here's the thing. When you're adding, your signs have to be the same. You're either doing 2 positives or you're doing 2 negatives. So because the 17 is a negative 17, then we're going to make both of these negatives, because that's the only way we're going to get a negative 17. If you're not sure, you can use your calculator to help you. So if I type in negative 3 minus 14, it does give me the 17, and the 17 is negative. So we are not just replacing the 17, we have to replace this whole thing. So we need to make sure these 2 numbers combine to give us a negative 17b. So I'm going to underline the negative 17b. I'm going to draw 2 arrows to represent that I'm going to replace the negative 17 with those 2 numbers. So I'm going to put negative 3b minus 14b, and I'm going to bring down the first term in the front, so 2b squared, and I'm going to take that plus 21 here. And notice that it did go from being 3 terms to 4 terms. So this is now ready to factor by grouping. All right, so let's go ahead and take a moment to do this one. So this is A, this is B, this is C. So first step is to multiply A and C. So now this number is going to be a little bit bigger. So if you multiply 5 times 20, so I'm going to say A times C, and we're going to say 5 times 20 gives us 100. So the 100, that's the number we're going to use to list our factors. So I'm going to come over here to the side. I'm going to start off with 100, and I like to start off with 1. So 1 times 100. 2 times 50. 3 will not go in evenly, but 4 will. 4 and 25. 5 and 20. 6, I believe 6 does not go in evenly, so we're going to skip it. Neither does 7, 8, nor 9. But we do have 10 and 10. So because we have 10 and 10, we're done. 10 doubles up, and we're done. Okay. So from here, we're looking at these numbers, and we're trying to look for a specific number. We're trying to look for them to be 48, but if you're not sure if you're looking for an addition or subtraction, I'm going to ask you to circle this, because that tells you we're looking for two numbers that if you subtract them, give you 48. Now, like I said before, I'm not worried about the negative on the 48. I'm just looking for the number that gives me 48. We can play with the signs later. So if I subtract 1 from 100, it gives me 99. If I subtract 2 from 50, it gives me 48. So we're using this one right here. I'm going to circle it, because if I subtract these two, if I multiply these two numbers, it will give me a 100. If I subtract them, it will give me 48. So we're going to say 2A, 50A. So now I just need to figure out, because I'm subtracting, one needs to be positive, the other one needs to be negative. So which one needs to be positive, which one needs to be negative for me to get a negative 48? So like I said before, grab your calculator, play around with it, but I am going to give you a trick. If one has to be positive and one has to be negative, the bigger number should have the same sign that you're looking for. So since I'm looking for a negative 48, 50 is bigger than 2, so that one's going to be negative. So that means that this one has to be positive. So for a subtraction problem, you should have one of each, one positive, one negative. For an addition problem, they both need to be the same, 2 positives or 2 negatives. So if you're not sure, you don't think that looks right, or you just want to double check, grab your calculator and type it in. 2 minus 50. And it does give you the 48 you're looking for, and it's also negative. So we need them to be the same. Not just the 48, but we need it to be negative. The sign needs to match. So now that I've found what I'm looking for, I'm going to go ahead and expand it with those two numbers. So I'm going to start with a positive 2A and then a negative 50A. Take your front number, which is 5A squared. Take your back number, which is a negative 20. And now we went from having 3 numbers to 4 numbers. This is now ready to factor by grouping. The number one question I get asked is, does it matter which one goes where? And the answer is no. If you put a negative 50 here and the positive 2 over here, your answer at the end, after you simplify it, will be exactly the same. Order does not matter as long as it gives you the number in the middle with the sign in the middle. Okay, so y'all, those were the last 2 examples for this section right here for expanding. I hope that this has helped. I know it's a lot of numbers. I know it's a lot of little things that we need to look at, but it's a whole process that we have to practice before we get good at it. So I hope that these examples have helped, and I'll see you in the last video for this series.